Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, POS Technology to Support and Sustain the Retail Store of the Future. I'm Jim Roddy, the Vice President of Marketing and a Business Advisor for the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Thank you so much for joining us. This panel session is designed specifically for technology solution providers interested in serving cannabis dispensaries, as well as decision makers at the dispensaries themselves, right? So we're talking to retail IT resellers, software providers, and payment processors under the solution provider umbrella, and then owners and managers who are running these dispensaries. So our panel is going to share challenges, strategies, and tactics to build partnerships and embrace technologies essential to enhancing the customer experience for the cannabis dispensary of today and tomorrow. All right, before we get going, this session is being recorded. Questions can be submitted anytime throughout the panel discussion via the Q&A tab, and we're happy to answer them as they come in. And we plan to have time at the end for your questions. All right, well, let's meet our expert panelists. First, we have Stephen Bergeron. He's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing of North America at APG Cash Store. Mr. Bergeron, how are you today?
Doing well, Jim. Good to see you.
Great. Always great to see you. We also have as a special guest, Rick Smith. He's the Director of Business Development at ELO. Rick, great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, happy to have you here. And then finally, we have Brad Miller. He's the Northern Regional Channel Manager at Epson. Hey, Brad, welcome.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Great. So thanks, everybody, for being here today. So before we discuss the latest technology trends, let's discuss how each of you believe the COVID pandemic impacted retail merchants in terms of resources, budget, go-to-market strategy within the POS community. So why don't we go left to right on our screen here? Mr. Bergeron first. What would be your take on that question?
I think we've seen a couple of very specific trends this year. Last year there were a lot of rollouts that were put on hold, particularly in Tier 1, and those kind of came forward at the end of last year, beginning January, February this year. So our large Tier 1 OEMs really took off gangbusters. And it was probably midway through Q1 that we started to see the small independent retailer, small independent technology provider starting to see volumes come back to life and a steady run rate go through our distribution partners. So this has really been phased in, where we hit a cliff last year on or about, March 15th, give or take an hour, and then it rattled through most of last year into December, but in December, as they started talking about vaccines and such, we started to hear rumblings of maybe this year is going to be soft, but not like it was in 21, and we've seen just the opposite. We've seen an explosion this year, which has brought forward a whole bunch of other challenges that we can talk about later.
Right, I'm sure we'll dive in, talk supply chain issues that a lot of folks are having. Rick Smith, your take on how you saw retailers, and dispensaries, underneath that retail umbrella. How were they impacted by the COVID pandemic?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I see it in a couple of different ways. Obviously, we all know the challenges that the last year and change has brought us from any industry that's supporting end users that are coming into stores. So it's a tremendously difficult year in terms of that. But on the positive side of that, if you want to think of anything that could have been a positive side, it really gave a lot of the retailers the ability to take some time, sit back and rethink their digital strategy altogether, maybe internalize some additional systems at point of sale that they typically would not have. And I think it was really important that happened, because coming out of the pandemic has been, in my mind, even more challenging with the labor issues that we have. So the more our systems have been able to be adapted to allow our customers to become a little bit more self-reliant, is helping to focus our labor on the execution of order rather than the placement of order, which in turn is creating a better customer experience. So we're able to keep that customer experience high while keeping business rolling with less staff than we ever have before.
Yeah, everybody, even if you didn't want to be more efficient, you're forced to be more efficient, right? You got to get the job done with way
Absolutely.
fewer people, and technology is playing an increased role. Brad, your take on this question in terms of how COVID impacted retailers. What have you seen from an Epson standpoint?
Yeah, just to give a little perspective. So I manage about a dozen of our elite partners from coast to coast. And it really depended on what retail space that you were in. I have partners that are 100% hospitality and they got crushed, right? Because of all, closing and labor shortages and all that. But I also have partners that do DIY and dollar store and things like that. And they did very, very well. So that part of it, was from A to Z as far as the demand is concerned. But I agree with what both Rick and Steven said. It's really come back strong. There's a pent up demand for services as well as systems. And Q2 was very strong for us, and Q3 is going to be even stronger. But to Steven's point, the supply chain thing is impacting that to some degree. But we've seen it very strong comeback so far.
Got it. And speaking of comebacks, that's my next question is, so all signs are really pointing to a resurgence of shoppers of all types and in all industries, whether it's general retail, cannabis dispensaries, restaurants. How do you see, and Rick, why don't you take this first? How do you see this rebound playing out? We just talked about looking back, look ahead. How do you see this continuing to go 2021 into 2022?
I see that, I like to use the term that the resurgence is and will continue to be both immediate and organic. So as Brad was just referring to, our customers are excited to get back out there and anxious to get back to the most normal way of shopping that they're used to. But also it's happening a little bit more organically, where a lot of customers and a lot of brands are still choosing to take their time and feel it out for their safety and their convenience. We're seeing a ton of trending now that a lot of the things that we put in place for safety over the last year have really just become more convenient to the customer. Safety trends are terrific trends, and you need to be on top of those, but they're short-term trends. But when those start to transition over to convenience-based trends, those are trends that are going to stick around for years, if not decades. So I think the resurgence is going to change the way our shoppers shop. They're still going to want to shop in store, but their pickup experience might be a little different. But at the end of the day, I think of it as it's the end user, our customer, that is going to choose their safe journey. Our job as vendors and our job as retailers is to have the ability to give them the tools to choose that journey. If they're comfortable with a traditional face-to-face point of sale experience, terrific, let's let that happen. But if they're not comfortable and they want that self-service experience and more interaction with technology than human to human, then terrific, let's allow that as well, and put a lot of thoughts into how we can deliver as well. Delivery can be both in home and on premise.
Yeah, and you might be steering the consumer a little bit, but you're not going to be dictating to them, right? You've got to adapt to what they want, because essentially they're in charge. Steve, how would you answer this? What are you looking for in terms of how things are going to rebound going forward?
This is going to be a very rich offering, and option is unlimited. And I absolutely agree with what Rick is seeing. Retailers are still going to have checkouts situations, but is it 100% unattended? When I talk to my friends in the self-checkout business today, the big thing is the convertible checkout. So from afternoon, it's self-checkout because I don't need a cashier to help me. But maybe on a Saturday or a Thursday when everybody gets paid and the lines are out the door, so to speak, it's going to be attended checkout and off you go. I was in the local grocery store recently, 2 days ago, and it was about 4 o'clock, and all those convertible lanes were self-checkout because everybody was there with a bag with 4 things in it. And so how do we get in and out really quick? working on a project right now with our friends at Epson, where we're having the printer be customer facing, the scanner customer facing, the pin pad customer facing, but yet there's still a cashier engaged. So if they want to pay with cash, there is a cashier, but everything else is, I'm going to self-scan, I'm going to get my receipt, I'm going to do my pin pad, and off I go. So I'm engaged with a cashier, but I may not be utilizing the cashier to give money and pay forward. So I think those are going to be the options. And ultimately, I absolutely agree with Rick. It is the consumer, that's going to dictate where I want to go, because that's where I'm the most comfortable. We're still seeing sneeze guards. Everybody thought, mid-spring, all the sneeze guards are going to go away. No, they're still staying, because I feel comfortable that way. In some places they've been taken down, in other places they remain up. So I think it's just going to be option rich from what it used to be with, this is how we do point of sale, period. It's now going to be very much based on the vertical, not so much the tier, but on the space and how do people want to be engaged with. And that's going to be around for quite a while. How long is this going to be, this event and this upsurge? I'm seeing it for the next couple of years. I mean, we're already getting forecasts into next year that are very healthy, with some additional carry forward going into 23. So I think 21's been great, 22's looking very strong, and see it continuing into 23 as we go forward.
And I'll share my perspective here, so folks can see my title as the Vice President of Marketing and Business Advisor for the RSPA. Underneath that is, we have a cannabis community of technology solution providers. It's now, we just went over 175 individuals who are members of that group. That continues to grow and grow. And one thing that we've seen through the eyes and ears of our members is, from a cannabis perspective, of course, it was very strong, same with liquor and beer and all that stuff during 2020. But the biggest change that they saw is that these dispensaries, everything was in person, they started adapting towards, what can we do from an e-commerce standpoint, right? What can we do from a curbside, from a kiosk, from a delivery standpoint? And they really had to up their game in that regard. And so where a lot of dispensaries were almost like a mom and pop shop, right? You walk in, you drop your cash, you get your product, and you leave. They very quickly had to pivot and expand all their technology offerings. So Rick, before I ask my next question, for those who came in late, so again, this session is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to check it out on demand. You can submit questions anytime through the Q&A tab. We're happy to answer them as they come in. And we also plan to have time at the end for questions as well. So wanted to make sure everybody who showed up late knew that as well. So Brad, let's talk about TCO. When we're talking about, choosing a sustainable, point of sale technology. So total cost of ownership. What are some of the vendor characteristics that you think resellers should look for in terms of TCO when they're choosing to put together a bundle, for retail in general, for a cannabis dispensary in particular?
Yeah, Jim, we talk about this a lot with our partners. If I can puff up Epson's chest a little bit, the reason Epson's so popular in the market is because our products last so long. They're very durable. Partners like that. It's generally the failure point in a point of sale system because it's a very mechanical device. But from a system perspective, not only do you want to vet your hardware and your software, but what are the services that a partner is bringing to the solution? When my lane goes down, how's that going to get up, and what's that going to look like? Do I have partners that go on site and do those sort of things, and I have partners that do it remotely, and it just depends on the model that fits you as a retailer. Both do very well in that respect. Some of them will be on site and they'll do everything. They'll do your Wi-Fi, your Ethernet drops, and others will send a bundle. You open up a box, you follow the instructions, they remote in, you're up and running. Something goes wrong, they overnight you a printer or a cash drawer, whatever it might be. So you want to ask those questions up front? What kind of services are they providing? In addition to that, what's the software providing? Even before the pandemic, analytics was a huge thing that retailers and owners were looking for. You know, what kind of data am I gathering on my customers? Can I customize, you know, campaigns or marketing opportunities? So that is all still playing a huge role in how people choose their systems.
Great. So that's TCO. Stephen, can you talk about reliability? So why is reliability important, again, from a reseller standpoint, and also if you're running a cannabis dispensary, how important is that? Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Bergeron.
Yeah, I've got construction going on in the house, so I'm trying to keep it down to a dull roar here. Picking up on where Brad just touched on, if I'm a one lane store, cannabis, or two terminals, and one of my key peripherals goes down, what am I going to do? So I think I need to look at, what do I need for uptime to be successful to take care of my customers? And then I would say, you know, what are the most commonly failed components within that, in that environment? And so it's, you know, the electromechanical devices, the printers, the cash drawers, touch screens, scanners, probably not. They're a lot more reliable than printers and cash drawers. So I would be looking at what products in that, and those two classes have the best on uptime going forward, particularly with the cash drawer, where cannabis is highly cash centric, you know, 95+%. Some people say it's 100. With that drawer opening and closing all the time, that takes wear and tear. With the printer, with it getting a receipt all the time. So cutting corners where you think you're going to save money up front with the install, long term, if the drawer goes down, the printer goes down, and I have to take my POS terminal offline, that's more expensive than not. So that's from the eyes of the shop owner. If I'm the reseller, I've got a problem in that, do I really want to be running all over the place? Yes, it's a value add service to have on-site service, and that's a plus. But if I have to go out there all the time, now it's becoming a drag on my business. And we talked earlier about the labor issues. We're all being challenged with labor. So let's not, you know, kind of go down that path as we go forward. So I think the reliability both impacts the reseller, both from a labor and service perspective, and a brand reputation. You don't want to be, you know, well, he doesn't sell anything but junk. And then from the cannabis shop owner, you want as much uptime as you possibly can, because that's not going to help if you can't take care of your customer at the end of the transaction. So I look at it from both sets of eyes.
Got it. I'd also recommend that our audience consider reliability, not just from a, you know, what was just discussed with Brad and Stephen, is with the hardware breaking, but also the reliability of, I think Brad mentioned, analytics of tracking the data, because as a dispensary, you have regulations and requirements that you have to report to the state government, and they won't take excuses, right? Oh, you know, we had this thing happen, and you have to understand why I don't have the accurate report. They're not going to be like, oh, I feel bad for you because you're starting out. No, they'll come down with a hammer on you in that regard. And so you've got to make sure that the integrations work together as well to gather that data. And then it expands. A POS also has to tie in from a security standpoint. We've heard from a lot of our resellers in the RSPA cannabis community. Again, it depends on the state what the regulations are, but you have to keep on hand X amount of consecutive hours of videotape in terms of what's going on in and around your dispensary. So, you know, reliability can't be like, oh, it was up 23 hours a day. If the regulations are 24/7, you've got to have it up 24/7. No grace periods at all. So, all right. So we talked about TCO, and then there's also, it seems like, you know, best in class, right? Making sure that you have that right best in class technology, and then also a trusted advisor that the reseller has to guide the dispensary on this? It seems like those are all super important. So Rick, if you can take this first. So what period of time should our audience consider the TCO metric, right? Because you don't make money the first day that you install a new point of sale system. And should they consider use cases of their hardware in the TCO calculation when they're talking with a dispensary owner? So can you talk about that, Rick, first, and then Stephen, talk TCO, please.
Sure. Yeah. So in my opinion, you can imagine the period of time in a few different ways. The first way and the most obvious way is over the warranty period. So if your hardware is going to have a 3-year warranty, then you want to ensure that for a period of time, you're probably looking for your total cost of ownership to pay off a little quicker than one that has maybe a 5-year warranty. But you totally do want to take use case into that equation as well. So think about how hard those systems are going to work. So, on the ELO side, if we're talking about a touchscreen computer, well, there's going to be a much different use case between a point of sale terminal and self-service than there is on a time clock or a price checker. So you do want to factor in the use case of those products as well. Your point of sale self-service are going to pay for themselves in a much quicker time. And beyond the warranty period, also take into account the lifespan of that product. So your warranty may be 3 years, but that product could be supported an additional 3 or 5 years after warranty. So you should factor that in terms of your total cost of ownership as well, especially when you're dealing with your resellers, if there's a rip and replace or if there's a repair service being offered as well.
Great, thank you. And Stephen, your take on TCO, and I'll say this, I know that APG has a lot of strong metrics on this because I've been to your facility in Minneapolis a couple of times, and there's a secret room in the back that has your cash drawers and a bunch of your competitors, and there are robots in there essentially just opening and closing, and so you're able to measure out how many opens and closes. It's not just a guess. It's something that actually has some science behind it. So I guess, can you expand upon that and talk about, TCO over a period of time? Because you know what the fail rate is for those things and your
Absolutely. And I think I absolutely agree with what Rick just covered. Understand your environment. So I own a fast food restaurant with a drive-up window. That is totally different than a very pristine cannabis shop that I have the time as I'm bagging the product, I can close the drawer and go forward. So what's the environment that we're going to use? If I'm closing the drawer with my knee, my elbow, or my hip, that's a much more abusive world than very nice boutique and I close the drawer simply. So I always want to know where am I going with the product? And as such, I also want to know how many of your transactions, what % of your transactions are cash versus credit or debit or something else? And then, how much coin are you going to have? Because interestingly, you talked about the torture chamber that we have in the back of the factory in Minneapolis.
He's speaking figuratively, just to clarify.
Figuratively, yes. The second aspect of that test bed is the amount of weight we put in the drawer. So it's a combination of, we put the equivalent of 4, 6, 8 pounds of weight in the drawer and just keep opening and closing it. And we've literally had competitive drawers where the front of the drawer pops off, or the plastic wheels and bulb that they're using pop off and the drawer just kind of hangs over limp, like I do most mornings now that I'm 64. I got to get up again. But anyways, so understand your environment, absolutely, and understand the conditions in which you want to use it. I totally agree with Rick going down, how long do you want it to last? A drawer that's designed for 250,000 cycles and you're doing 500,000 cycles, 50,000 cycles a year, that's 3 to 5 years probably. So what's your longevity expectations, and then back into where you need to be. Every drawer doesn't have to be a 4 million cycle drawer. That's kind of why we have 3 classes of product to better serve the markets we're going after. So it's the right product for the right arena. And I think you just got to keep all of that together. It's not, one shoe fits all. It's understand where I'm going and what I'm trying to do with it. And you'll get there.
Thank you. And I was in trade magazine publishing for almost 18 years. And so we would some people would throw around TCO, and actually she then became my wife, was our copy editorial director. And she was like, TCO is a scientific formula, right? It is math. It is not just something that you throw around out there. So that's like accurate. And that's how vendors understand it, just like what you were talking about. But Brad, if you could start us off, like from a TCO perspective, what are end users, what are the dispensaries looking for, right? How do they talk in terms of TCO, and how do you recommend that our resellers talk with them? And how do you recommend the dispensary owners and managers on this call think about TCO? What's your take?
Yeah, I think you want to look for a vendor that gives you pre-sales and post-sale support. Are they providing the full turnkey solution, not only the hardware and the software? And I know I harp on services, but really that's the value add that your vendor brings. You can buy an Epson printer online from anywhere, right, for a lot less. But what are you buying when you buy that box? Because if that's how you're buying it, you're buying a box. Whereas if you're choosing an integrator and a partner that knows what they're doing, they've been doing it for many years. I see this all the time with end users. They don't know what they don't know. And when they have this dream of opening a business, the last thing on their mind is having to purchase a POS system, right? And so they tend to cheap out on it, and really you don't want to do that. Pick somebody that's going to give you support at the front end as well as the back end as a turnkey solution. And when I mention you don't know what you don't know, does the software have an accounting module, purchasing, inventory? Is it scalable? Do I want a loyalty package with this? Or do I not want that today, but maybe tomorrow? So there's a lot of things to look at, but trust your integrator. They've been doing it for a long time, and especially if they're providing a turnkey solution.
Yeah, a solution provider once said to me, he said, I understand, like the retailers who I serve, the dispensaries who I serve, they see me as a necessary evil, right? They didn't get into this business to be like, ooh, good, a point of sale system, right? They want that thing to be, as ubiquitous as possible. Like it's very quick and just works and stays all the time. So Rick, let me get your take on in terms of what end users are looking for from a TCO standpoint.
I like your story with your wife and TCO as a mathematical formula. I think the difference between what the reseller communication needs to be to the end user or dispensary is they're going to initially look specifically at cost of acquisition. So our job as vendors and resellers is to have that conversation and show how cost of acquisition is part of the formula of total cost of ownership. One big thing, and Stephen had mentioned it earlier as well, is you need to look at the system as a whole, but it's really important that you don't look at your system being down as a cost of repair or a cost of replace. The more important factor in a down system is the cost that you're losing an opportunity. So if you have 2 terminals and one is down, you're going to end up with longer lines, more people not staying through the total purchase. So think about the downtime that you're going to have by not having all of your systems up. So from a hardware perspective, you want that to be as reliable as possible. And from a reseller or partner perspective, you want to make sure that you have a trusted relationship that when things are down, they have the ability to fix fast. Whether that's on site, whether that's remote, just make sure those are built into your total cost of ownership as well.
Yeah, and Stephen, I want to get your take on this. But before we do, we have an ebook that the RSP created. It's called 7 Elements of a Successful Cannabis VAR. And one of the things in there is how they teach the dispensary owners and dispensary managers in terms of how they should view technology, not as just an initial cost, but about the TCO. And one of the things is quit treating your technology like it's with some band-aid, right? You have to get some holistic, rugged solution that's going to stay up and running. So again, that doesn't pull out any calculator to do TCO. It's kind of like grabbing it by the lapels and say, you got to end this frustration, quit cheaping out on it. So Stephen, what would be your take in terms of what end users and dispensaries are looking for from TCO? Is it more of that math, or is it more of the shaking them? I clearly, we're talking about torture chambers and shaking people, all figurative people. We're not a violent group.
Not on any given day, anyways. No, and I think we've all touched on it at varying levels. The cost of being down with the frustrated consumer is expensive, and that's not part of the math, because you don't know, is somebody willing to wait in line, who isn't, and who is, if we only have one terminal when we should have had two. My wife and I have where we live in Massachusetts, we have something like 7 or 8 dispensaries within a 3-mile radius. Our daughter has a place in north central Maine where we go and ski, and there's 6 dispensaries within a 5-mile radius. So when you start to look at that, people have choices. So I would be, as a cannabis owner, what am I going to be able to do to give my consumer the best possible experience? I want knowledgeable staff. Yep. I want to be able to talk intelligently about my product, whether it's the weed itself or CBD or whatever else I've got in the store. But then I want to have it be a seamless transaction, so they come back in, and they come back in tomorrow. And I think everything that Brad just talked about is, look at the entire process. Look at that relationship, because I do have choices. And I can go anywhere I want in Bethel, Maine, and in Somerset, Massachusetts. I can go into Rhode Island and Massachusetts and all over. What's going to keep me coming back? And if I'm frustrated at the point of transaction, that last mile, as they say, that's part of my TCO. That's expensive. What's going to keep Stephen coming back to that shop? So yes, the product, my cash drawer, Rick's touchscreen, Brad's printer, that's all part of it, but it's the experience in the whole solution. And then how do I go back and market to Stephen to come back in? And that's where Brad was talking about, what's my software package look like? What's my loyalty package look like? How can I keep building on that experience? And that holds true from the reseller. How can I build value with my relationship with the dispensary? And then from the same token, how can the dispensary build value with Stephen, the consumer of that product set? So it's all about building value within the TCO structure, I think.
Got it. Thank you. So we have only about 10 minutes left in this conversation. I have a few more questions I can ask the group, but again, if anybody wants to weigh in, use that Q&A function, start lining up now, and we'll call on you. We're here for you. We've covered a lot of what we wanted to in terms of talk about the fundamentals of it, and we're happy to answer any specific questions that you have if you're attending. So again, use that Q&A function there. Brad, can you take this next one? And I think you touched on a little bit before. What role does value add play in terms of TCO, where it's not just the product itself, it's the value adds that go along with it, how important those are?
Yeah, I think that's part of the intangibles that the integrator brings to the equation. We already talked about reliability, and you have 3 of the most reliable products with ELO and APG on here. But what is it that the partner's bringing to the equation? And a lot of it is, it's simple things. It's, when I call the 800 number and I'm down, does somebody pick up the phone? And can that person actually help me? Or is somebody coming on site, or are they going to have to overnight a printer? Whatever that model might be. But these are some of the questions that you want to ask your integrator is, what's your support model going to look like? And we've all three touched on this. When my lane is down, what's that model going to look like, and how soon am I going to be up? I think for integrators, it's the intangibles that bring them success. Anybody can sell a printer or cash drawer at a low price, but it's the services and really some of the software stuff that we talked about. To Stephen's point, even before the pandemic, the in-store experience was something that retailers were really focused on. Everybody wants to look like the Apple Store, and I could see a dispensary kind of looking like that to some degree. Tablets, I think Rick can probably speak more to this than I can, but tablets have taken a huge role on the shop floor, as showing different products, integrating right there with the POS system, whether it's out on the patio or in the store, integrating with the whole POS solution. So there's a lot of different intangibles I think you look at.
Got it. Thank you for that. And I'll also say from what we heard at Retail Now, we had an education, that's the RSPA's annual trade show. We had a cannabis networking reception and then an education track with that as well. We heard that a lot of dispensaries are turning over their point of sale solutions, right? The core software, and sometimes having to get new hardware. Somebody said, if you find a dispensary who's been in business for 3 years, they've probably already gone through 2 or 3 different systems there. So you think about all the grief that goes into that. And they say you should, as a reseller, talk about, I will take that burden off your hands, right? You don't have to worry about swapping all this stuff out. I'll be the one who keeps you up and running from that standpoint. I can help you make your technology decisions. So again, that's a value add that is going to play a key role in TCO, because they're investing their time, the owner and the manager investing their time in other areas of the business. So, all right. So again, if folks have any questions, feel free to line them up. If one comes in and says, are your backgrounds all not real? 3 of them aren't mine. These are real books that are on the shelf back here. So I can actually pull off the book and share them, just in case anybody did have that question for the group. So, all right. So we just had one come in from Al. So let's jump into that. He says, how important is future native integration of payments and other ISV applications on the POS, supportive of use cases for merchants and vendors, and intuitive consumer user experience? Who wants to take that? Again, I'll read it. How important is future native integration of payments and other ISV applications on the POS, supportive of use cases for merchants and vendors, and intuitive customer user experience? Who wants to take that?
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
I think
So
it.
is he asking about the future of payment? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I believe so. Why don't you answer it from that perspective, and Al can clarify if he needs to.
Well, I'll just chime in with what I know about payments, which isn't a lot, but touchless payment is really what we're seeing. We actually have printers that support that you just touch the printer and it, your transaction. And I think everybody has seen that from your phone or touchless is really what we're seeing. I'm not sure that answers the question.
I think that it's a great question, and it should be looked holistically into the entire system. I think it's, how can I future-proof my POS, and payments is just one aspect of that. What's the next best loyalty package? So I would say, if I'm selecting my point of sale software and application, I'd be asking all of those questions on, what is your forward capabilities of integration? The states are going to change the laws and regulations with seed to sale. So what other things am I going to have to tie into my point of sale? Do I need a different type of scale? Do I need payments? Do I need loyalty? What other tracking am I going to need to have somewhere down the line as this all goes forward? So what is your methodology, Mr. ISV? Or if I'm talking to the reseller, what is your ISV's methodology to do future-proofing integration so that I don't have to grip and rip a whole new app as I go forward? How do you stay current with all of that? So the user experience, payments is one of them. Absolutely agree with Brad. Even though I work for a cash drawer company, I do have one credit card. And I do experiment from time to time with a coffee app on my phone to tap and go. So yes, it's contactless is the wave of the future, albeit 35% of all just general transactions remain cash, which dipped a little bit during the pandemic, but coming back strong again. So I think you have to have all of that as you look into future-proofing the point of sale solution. And as hardware guys, it's hard for us to say that it does start with the software, because where does the code have to go to support what's next?
Yep, and Al added a couple qualifiers. First, he said future-proofing, yes, with an exclamation point. So we're on track with that. And then he also clarified, he said yes, because of today's challenging cannabis compliance environment. And I can say what we've seen from an RSPA standpoint with our cannabis community, there are some resellers who are working with software developers or just working in general in terms of being able to take cards, but it's kind of a roundabout way in terms of whether it's debit related or things of that nature. And so what they're really starting to position is themselves for the future, just like Stephen said, in terms of it's not, hey, once I get payments, do I have to throw this whole thing out? It's got to be able to integrate payments, because that is going to come around the corner. Once it's federally legal in the US, all these banks and payment processors are lining up. And I can say we've seen that inside our own cannabis community. Like I said, 175 individuals are part of that. I'd say about a dozen of those with payment processing companies. And you're like, why? What are they doing? Well, they're getting ready, because they definitely see the opportunity. So, all right, another question came in from an anonymous attendee. So again, Al, thanks for the first question. This is the anonymous attendee. It says, you mentioned the pivot to e-commerce due to COVID. This appears to mirror the pivot in the hospitality space. I recognize the panelists as industry leaders in the physical store, but can anybody talk about specific POS partners that got it right in the dispensary industry? Can anybody talk in terms of those specifics? Who got it right in the dispensary industry from an e-commerce standpoint?
We've done some work, and I think, Jim, Dave Alpert and the guys at RCS in
RCS
Colorado.
And Anthea is their cannabis software cannabis solution. Yep.
I think they've done a pretty good job, and they've also tied in loyalty and some of the other ancillary packages as well. And they're now doing some experimentation with Bitcoin as a form of payment, going down that spectrum. And I think that's most likely, if I were either the cannabis owner or the ISV or the reseller rather, trying to qualify the packages, I would do my research. And I think Jim's points within the RSPA community, but I would start to, and I would ask very pointed questions. How do you handle? What is the direction you're going? Can you integrate? How do you handle, buy online, pick up at the store, or whatever the case may be? So this is an interview process. I mean, you can like the guy because he comes in a bow tie, or whatever, but this is an interview, and ask all of those pointed questions. How do you manage under these conditions and get going forward? I think that's fair and well within your business right.
I would also add that it's probably a good conversation to have to see, what the partners have done and how they've handled similar situations in other verticals and other markets. So what's not allowed today in the US that may be allowed, maybe it's already active in Canada or in England. So you can look for partners that have experience with the way you're tracking in other markets as well.
I real quick, I know you got to go, Jim. We do have partners that, and I should say ISVs, that focus specifically in the cannabis market space. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know if you want to provide our contact information to the group, but I have a colleague who works specifically with a couple different ISVs that focus directly in that space.
Got it. I'll say this, you can find us all on LinkedIn, right? All of us have profiles on LinkedIn, and again, I guess so. Rick and Brad, you guys have more generic names than Mr. Bergeron, and I do. So you might have to type in Rick Smith Elo or Brad Miller Epson in order to track us down. But we're happy to connect you with some individual partners. I will say this, kind of to close it out, to answer that question, that there is a real frustration that we've heard through our resellers and some of the ISVs, where the solutions aren't exactly what these dispensary owners are looking for. That's where we see a huge opportunity for folks who have retail expertise to go in there and teach these cannabis dispensaries in terms of what a true customer experience is, what a great e-commerce integration is like. So there's definitely opportunities. We're very, very early on in this market. And so now's the time to get engaged. You don't have to have all your ducks in line. Start getting in there, selling one part of the solution, right? Whether it's handling the hardware, the touchscreen, the receipt printer, the cash drawer, get in there as a solution provider, start helping these dispensaries. So, all right, that's all the time that we have for today. Again, thanks to Stephen, Brad, and Rick for sharing their wisdom with us today. And thank you for attending this WeTech session. We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Again, reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. Happy to continue this conversation offline as well. Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks everybody for attending today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right.